Hi, I'm Alex Bennick, and we're back with Mike Shapiro and Adam Leventhal. So you were talking earlier about the tremendous collection of intellectual talent at Sun, and obviously that era has kind of come and gone. But if you look at today's landscape, is there a place, a company that you kind of think is kind of in the same mold?
The way, the company that strikes me most as being similar to Sun, although I haven't worked there, and so I should just say this is an outsider's perspective, is really Google. And what I mean being similar about that is I think that there's an engineering culture there that is very is focused on brilliant technological ideas, is encouraging people to experiment and to work in this huge collection of different areas. I think it's no accident, and part of the reason I think that is because, of course, a key guy in developing that culture at Google was Eric Schmidt, and Eric Schmidt's previous major role was to be the CTO of Sun for a long time early on, and so I think that that's probably something that he brought from the Sun culture over to Google. The core business is obviously very different, and so Google has built this incredible financial engine around AdWords that powers their ability to just go experiment on all these other things and get into other areas. Sun's core business was a business that disappeared basically, which was a high margin enterprise service business, and so it wasn't successful in keeping all those other science projects going. But that's the company that reminds me the most of what's going on inside.
I think there are elements of, certainly there in Google, but also in Facebook, where they're funding very interesting projects that are not necessarily core to their business, but interesting explorations in systems and hardware and artificial intelligence and so forth. It's kind of a trip going back to their campus, which of course is in the Sun building.
Yes.
And while I
they made it a lot nicer though.
Well, I think I have
more free food.
It feels to me like going back to my old childhood home, which had the Sun campus had very little appeal, but it feels like that childhood home has been reinvented by Russian oligarchs or something. But what I love about it is that they've left up a bunch of the Sun logos, and very sanguine about it. It's interesting saying that
you think it's as a reminder.
It's a good reminder, right? Yeah. It's a good reminder that these technology trends, companies that were dominant, these technology trends come to an end, and that happened to Sun, and it could easily happen to us.
So you guys both really went kind of on a journey from being OS and kernel guys to being storage guys, and it's kind of continued through work you did at Sun and now in your current roles. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, at Sun, after having worked on the operating system for a very long time, Adam and I were part of a small cabal of folks who decided to start this crazy project team that we called Fishworks, and this was sort of late in Sun's history now, and we decided to take Solaris 10 and the ZFS file system, which had been developed by some of the folks in our group, and form this sort of renegade storage team to go off and try to build an actual storage product using all this software technology at Sun and hardware technology at Sun to make a storage product. So we both sort of, I think, started our storage journey there in creating that product, and then obviously have both of us, I guess, like it because we've both continued to work in different areas of storage since then. And it's just a place where, as a systems person, there's just tremendously hard problems to be solved and a lot of new technology transitions that I think the industry is still trying to grapple with. So it's a really exciting area.
Where you see storage going, I think has a real systems focus, or that is to say, see folks with systems backgrounds and other types of disparate backgrounds coming to storage. And most of the innovation in storage is not happening in hardware, it's happening in software. I think the thing that we learned as a couple of software guys wandering into the storage space is that hardware is a lot more difficult than we gave anyone credit for, bumping into issues with PHYs and issues with signaling and issues with firmware that gave us terrible reliability. So we learned a lot through those Fishworks days. We apparently
learned... you learned how to scream at disk drives, right?
Yes, we did.
And we learned that screaming at disk drives hurts their performance. Our colleague Brendan Gregg found that out.
Still Sun's most viewed video of all time.
But, yeah, by orders of magnitude.
By orders of magnitude.
But apparently Mike and I learned pretty different lessons, because I thought I am never going into hardware again. I'm going to steer clear of that, and went with solutions that certainly interact with storage but operate at a higher level at Dell Fix.
Yeah.
Whereas Mike got down into the thick of it.
Yeah, I've continued to go even further deeper, but I don't know. I really love, this started for me at Fishworks. I just love the systems problems where you can work on the hardware and the software at the same time and really design the whole product. And that's pretty rare. Although I think one of the things that's great that's happening in the industry is with consumer devices and some of the new technologies available around manufacturing, like 3D printers and all that stuff. It's actually, for working on small systems, it's actually easier for people now than ever before to actually do hardware and software at the same time, certainly than it was 10 years ago.
It's actually
but I love
interesting.
that. I think that's great. I think it's great too. I mean, Alan Kay has the famous line about that, about, that if you want to, you should build, if you want to write software, you should build the hardware that runs your software, or whatever better way he phrased it. And, I think that's something that I'm really passionate about, and I love learning about both sides of that equation.
It's interesting because there are kind of competing threads in the industry now about, building software that's disaggregated from hardware that would run on any arbitrary, commodity server, versus building software that, is probably running on a set of commodity hardware, but is engineered for specific, configuration or hardware compatibility or things like that.
That's exactly right. You see these secular trends towards public cloud and Amazon, where you don't need to lock yourself into a particular tier of storage, but if you run out of IOPS, you just swipe your credit card to get more IOPS.
Right.
So you've got a complete separation between the infrastructure and the software you build on top. And then it'll also allows you to build much more intelligent software to operate on those environments with completely different constraints. And on the other hand, you have these hardware, software appliances, things like from Exadata to what Mike and his team have built at DSSD to stuff like Pure Storage or Diablo, all these different hardware platforms.
Yeah, and I think if anything, I mean, you sort of mentioned, disaggregation there, which I think is really key right now. And, just connecting to what Adam said, what I think is so fascinating is if you want to do software now and you want to run something, as Adam said, the way that you can operationalize that is totally different. And so, especially as a startup, by the way, the ability as a startup to spend so much less on the infrastructure you need and then scale the infrastructure if you're developing software, that's an amazing change that's just happened in the past few years. At the same time, the way those cloud providers are actually building the hardware systems to deliver that, there's a tremendous amount of innovation going on there. And the idea that, there's just one kind of commodity server and that's what you want, well, every one of those major companies, whether it's Facebook or Google on down the line, they're all designing their own servers.
Yep.
They're all designing their own management software to deal with that. And they're all trying to do this disaggregation thing around how do they separate compute network and storage elements from each other, but connect them together in a fabric and then get the economies of scale that they're trying to get. So even as for some people, there's less hardware to touch, for other people actually touching the hardware, there's a whole new generation of problems that have to be solved there, which I think is really fascinating for people who are into that. And all that, the notion of what is a server even is completely changing right now, in terms of, because the people who are managing servers now, which perhaps there are fewer of them, but the challenges they face and the cost benefit trade-offs of certain decisions there is really undergoing a very radical change right now.
Yeah, it's certainly a fascinating time. A plethora of new hardware, new hardware capabilities. People are now discovering that, right? Whether they knew anything about distributed systems or not, they're now operating on top of one, and you can kind of learn that the hard way sometimes.
Yeah, it's interesting whether you're in Amazon, more obviously building a distributed system, or on your multi-core, multi-threaded NUMA laptop, you're building on effectively distributed systems or ones that are approaching those kinds of scales at all levels.
Yeah. So Adam, tell us about Dell Fix a little bit. Obviously it picked up a thread that you guys had worked on ZFS, but obviously in a much different direction than the products you were working on at the end of your Sundays with Fishworks.
Well, it was interesting in that one of the things that really attracted me to the Dell Fix was bringing a lot of the technology areas that I was familiar with, like ZFS and like the descendants of the Solaris operating system, and paired it with a bunch of technologies and business areas I knew very little about, like databases and enterprise applications. So it was built on the basic observation that for enterprise applications and enterprise databases, for every production copy, there are many non-production copies. The storage of it, the management of those copies, the distribution of those copies takes a long time and slows down projects. So what we built, now ZFS is our file system at the core, but what we built focuses on applications and application developers and bringing things to market more quickly. Now, some of the problems that I get most into and most excited about are the ones that tie problems throughout the stack, where, for example, we can match our knowledge of databases and knowledge of applications with our knowledge of the file system and come up with solutions that are completely unique to our platform that other folks really couldn't execute on.